Okay, we have two last-minute changes. One is that Ms. Natalia Bolton just informed us today, or just right before this meeting, that she has withdrew from the race. She had withdrawn from the race, so she is not going to be here tonight. And then also this afternoon, Ms. Lai Ching also confirmed that she's not attending. So I think what I'm going to do is invite Representative Ma to sit up here together with our moderator, Mr. Justin Sia, and I will do my welcoming remarks. Good evening. My name is Grace Chen. I'm the Executive Director of Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community. I want to welcome you to the 2024 24th District State Representative Forum. Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community, CBCAC, is a coalition of major service organizations in the Chinese American community aiming to empower Chinese Americans in the greater Chicago area through civic engagement and community development. We have organized candidate forums in Chinatown for the past 15 years and are very pleased that we are able to offer this to you today. Thank you for attending tonight's forum. And we're also excited that many organizations within the 24th District co-hosted this event and helped publicize the event to their members and helped us plan this event. Thank you very much to all of our co-hosts. These are our co-host organizations, and they are Bridgeport Alliance, Chinatown Chamber of Commerce, Chinese American Museum of Chicago, Chinese American Service League, Midwest Asian Health Association, OCA Greater Chicago, People Matter, Project Vision, Pui Tak Center, South Branch Park Advisory Council, and Sealand Association. So these organizations represent organizations from Chinatown, Bridgeport, as well as McKinley Park. The purpose of this forum is to educate our community about the March 19th election. This event is being live streamed directly to YouTube and will also be publishing the video later on our YouTube channel. And we want to thank Pui Tak Center and especially Executive Director David Wu for providing this venue for this event, and to Nate and Kevin and Shao of the VowChat team for providing voice-to-text translation. Our friends Jane Lau and Giovanna Carrillo with the Chicago Board of Elections are here today and can help you register to vote and answer any procedural voting questions that you might have after the forum. They've brought the voting machine, and they're also recruiting bilingual Chinese English and Spanish English election judges. So please stop by and talk to them if you have questions or if you're interested in being an election judge. One more note, we have 3-hour parking validations available. Please see our staff, especially Annie Lau, at the end of the evening to get your parking validated if you parked at either of the Chinatown parking lots. And after the forum, we encourage folks to use the buddy system so that you can walk to your final destination. Our community is safe because we all watch out and care for each other. Tonight's questions were curated from submission by community members. Special thanks to folks from co-hosting organizations that helped us sort and finalize the questions. And while we can't get to all of the questions, we'll be sending the candidates a final collection of questions from today, as well as online submissions. We want to encourage folks to stay engaged, keep asking questions, and hold your elected officials accountable. Most of all, thanks to all of you for showing up and getting informed and getting involved with your community to elect the next 24th District State Representative. Now I'd like to introduce Justin Sia, an attorney and our moderator for tonight, and then also Representative Ma.
Thank you, Grace. And before we begin this forum, please direct your attention to your fact sheet handout that explains what a state representative is responsible for and includes some important facts on current issues affecting our community. I highly encourage you all to take one. The fact sheets are available in English, Chinese, and Spanish. Voter guides are also available in English and Chinese. So tonight, as moderator, I have two responsibilities: to ensure that the candidate has enough speaking time, the allotted speaking time that is, and to ensure that we end on time tonight. To meet these two goals, I promise to be respectful to the candidate, and I ask for your respect as well. As for the format of this forum, we will begin with a candidate opening statement for 2 minutes. Then Representative Ma will provide open responses to curated questions posed from the community. Representative Ma will then be given 90 seconds to respond to each question. We will break up these open questions with a few simple yes/no questions. Then, Representative Ma, you will provide a closing statement for 2 minutes. Our timekeepers will give you a 30-second warning for each question. If you go past the allowed time, our timekeeper may stop you with a bell. You will be able to finish the sentence you started, of course. If you, Representative Ma, do not use all the time allotted for a response, the unused time cannot be applied to any other question. And finally, the last portion of the forum will be pre-selected audience questions. All in-person attendees should have received index cards, but my understanding is that because we have one candidate here tonight, we will have an open, some time for questions from the public at the end of the forum. And finally, before we begin, I'd like to emphasize a few ground rules for our singular candidate here, but also for our attendees. Everyone here tonight should know that tonight's event is a candidate forum and not a debate. Representative Ma, you should use your time only to respond to the question asked. And as the moderator, I may choose to insert follow-up questions or ask you to clarify your response for the benefit of everyone attending. For the audience, we ask that you refrain from shouting, booing, and cheering during the forum. There cannot be antagonizing in any form. No campaign materials, including banners, signs, brochures, and buttons, are to be displayed in this room. Please note that any attendee who does not abide by these rules may be asked to leave. However, I will make one exception to the no cheering rule momentarily. At this time, I invite you to welcome our Illinois 24th District State Representative, Teresa Ma. All right, well, Representative Ma, I did not expect to be sitting right next to you today to having this candidate forum turn into more of a conversation, but we're very excited to have you here, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I think this format is better for everyone because, you know, we're among friends. These are community members here, and, you know, I've always been completely transparent, and so I welcome direct questions from the audience, and I welcome a conversational pace for this forum.
That's right, that's right. So, you know, I have first in my script that you're allowed to give a 2-minute opening statement if you'd like.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think for folks who have never met me before, or, you know, this is the first time hearing me speak in person, and you want, you know, some basic facts about who I am and what I stand for and what I've done, I'm happy to give a little brief introduction of myself. I'm State Representative Teresa Ma. I am the daughter of immigrants. You know, that's been an important part of my identity. My parents came to the U.S. More than 50 years ago, and my experience growing up as the child of immigrants has been very formative in my life and in my understanding of what the needs are in the community I now represent. So, you know, I didn't grow up in Chicago. I actually grew up in California, and I came to Chicago more than 30 years ago to get my PhD at the University of Chicago. I started my career as a college professor and then moved on a different path, ended up doing some community organizing. I actually worked for CBCAC at one point, and 8 years ago, I decided to put my hat in the ring and run for state representative. I've served in what I believe is the best job I've ever had. I'm a full-time legislator, and I'm, you know, very much in tune with the community. I'm, you know, you always find me all around and talking to constituents, visiting organizations, being really involved in what the community needs. And I see my position as one in which, you know, it says here that my job is to advocate for the community. But not only do I do that, I watch out for the community's interests when I vote on legislation in Springfield, and then I maintain a district office where I have bilingual staff in Spanish, English, and Chinese, and they help community members problem solve and break through bureaucracy. And so I'm very proud of the work that I do. I see it as working to improve people's lives every day, and that is what I would love to have the opportunity to continue to do, because I see more needs that I can address in the community. And so I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunity to get into all of those.
That's right. Thank you, Representative. So moving right into the questions then, this first question that we have is about the Chinatown neighborhood, and it's a bit of a two-part question. In the past 3 decades, ethnic neighborhoods across the country have seen population and land loss. What are your plans to protect Chinatown and surrounding neighborhoods from further gentrification and displacement of its residents?
Right. Well, so, you know, we've been fortunate here in Chicago to live in the only Chinatown in the country that's expanding rather than declining. And I think a lot of that has to do with the people who live and work and serve the community around here. You know, I see folks like C.W. Chan, who's been, you know, very much engaged in maintaining the health and power and livelihood of the community. David Wu over there, who is the executive director here at Pui-Tak Center. You know, we've all been working really hard over the years, especially, you know, I remember when I worked for CBCAC, our goal was to make sure that the community had a voice and a seat at the table in, you know, various levels of government, so that we could continue the development of the community and to maintain its viability. And I will, you know, I am committed to continuing to be a part of that, to continue to bring resources into the community, to watch out for gentrification and make sure that, you know, that's not something that will cause the decline or disappearance of this Chinatown, which I'm so proud to represent and be a part of.
Thank you, Representative. You know, in the same vein, there are several city and federal departments responsible for addressing housing needs, and they include the Chicago Department of Housing, the Chicago Housing Authority, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And for everyone watching, please refer to their websites for their responsibilities. According to the Chicago Department of Housing Affordable Rental Housing Resource List, there are a total of 140 affordable rental units for seniors in Bridgeport, and 177 multifamily affordable rental units in Armour Square, Brighton Park, out of all of the neighborhoods that belong to the 24th District. Chinatown area's senior housing units are currently operating with a 25-plus year wait list. How would you work with local housing authorities to increase the number of affordable housing units for low-income individuals and families, as well as seniors?
Well, so I have long been a proponent of affordable housing. I know that there are, very serious needs here in Chinatown. I'm also aware of efforts to construct new housing, and I, for one, am very much interested in learning more about the projects that have been envisioned, and figuring out how I could support those efforts. I was supportive of the effort here. Right nearby, CCBA was interested in building new housing, and I know that there's another project that's a little farther north, near the river, that is currently ongoing. So I'm continuing to monitor these efforts. I'm willing to work closely with the alderwoman and the city to come up with ideas to increase the affordable housing stock. At the state, I've been co-sponsor of legislation to provide more subsidies or tax credits for affordable housing construction. And so, there are all kinds of ways that we can address this, and I'm very much interested in being involved in all of those discussions.
Okay, thank you very much. Pivoting to an issue that is close to your heart, I know, and close to the hearts of many people here, is immigration. Chicago's Welcoming City Ordinance, passed in 2012 and reinforced in 2021, ensures our immigrant community members, regardless of immigration status, can access services and programs and are safe from local police enforcing immigration law by collaborating with ICE, or Immigration Customs Enforcement. What is the state of Illinois doing to address the issues of new migrants arriving in the city of Chicago? Also, how do you balance limited resources against increasing need to address this situation?
Yeah, so yesterday the governor gave his State of the State address and budget proposal, and in that proposal he spoke about the $182 million that he is committed to spending along with Cook County on housing and addressing some of the needs of the new migrants. We are fortunate in the state of Illinois that we have long had a history of policies that make us one of the most welcoming states in the nation. We have had an immigrant services line item that guarantees a certain amount from the state budget to that goes to immigrant community organizations that serve the immigrant community. We've increased the amount for welcoming centers. We have provided housing assistance even during COVID, for undocumented community members. And I think that what we saw during COVID, you ask about maintaining a balance, and during COVID we saw that the virus, didn't care about your immigration status. And in order to maintain the health of the entire community, we had to make sure that, everyone was taken care of, with the safety net programs that we had. That, we had to vaccinate everyone regardless of immigration status. We had to, make sure that people had housing assistance and pandemic assistance in different forms. And so, I think that the state of Illinois did this well, and it did it in a balanced and humane way. And I'm proud to have been a supporter of all those policies over the last 7.5 years that, I've been in the state legislature. So I think in conjunction with the city's policies of being of welcoming immigrants, I think that that's consistent at the state level. We've always been very forward-thinking in terms of welcoming immigrants into our state and our communities. And I think that, you know, what it means is we have a pipeline to, you know, help people become taxpayers and contributing members of our community in the future. You know, I'm gonna go beyond the time limit on this particular question because, you know, when I was in Springfield the last 2 days, you know, the Republicans on the other side of the aisle in our chamber made some, you know, really hostile, ugly remarks against immigrants in our chamber. And I wanted to remind them, you know, so 100 years ago, my grandfather came to this country. He was a paper son, and so, you know, his status was, you know, he was not welcome in this country. He was not authorized to be in this country, so he would have been called illegal. But he contributed to the economic growth of this country. And, you know, 100 years later, you know, his granddaughter is an elected member of the Illinois legislature. In fact, the first Asian American elected to the Illinois General Assembly, right? So, you know, I think that, you know, when we look at the crisis that we're facing now, it's important to be humane because we're talking about human beings. You know, it's not right to, you know, allow people to freeze or starve to death when, you know, they're in our city and our state, not because, you know, they want to be, but because they were sent here by the governor of Texas against their will, and they find themselves here, and, you know, there's no way to, you know, get rid of people. You know, I think that the Republicans and, you know, those who are extremists and anti-immigrant and have these extreme attitudes that are unwelcoming, you know, that they're not seeing the potential for people to become part of our community, to, you know, get a little bit of assistance, you know, right now when they need it, and then eventually, you know, they're going to be contributing members of our society, tax-paying members of our society like you and I. And, you know, the Republican colleagues are constantly talking about, oh, you know, Illinois is so bad and all these people are leaving, and you know, our tax base is going to other states. Well, you know, here we are with population that's coming and joining our communities, and currently, you know, the influx is maybe challenging to deal with, but I think that together, you know, we can figure this out and, you know, help people establish themselves as contributing members of our society.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative Ma. And of course, I allowed a significant amount of more time because that issue is so important to our community, and it will continue to be important over the next term and beyond. So thank you. Pivoting to another important topic, the question is, what have you already done, before today that is, to support and protect Asian Americans from anti-Asian hate and anti-Asian sentiment? And how will you continue to protect these communities after the election?
Right. So, you know, when Asian Americans were under attack, especially during the pandemic, the members of the Asian American Caucus, Legislative Caucus in Springfield, passed landmark legislation to establish the TEACH Act, the Teaching Asian American Community History Act, which requires a unit of study about Asian American history in K through 12 Illinois public schools. And it was a historic piece of legislation. We were the first in the country to be able to do that, and it has some long-term ramifications, right? So, you know, teaching Illinoisans about the history of the fastest growing ethnic group or ethnic population in the state, and helping, you know, people who you know, may not have encountered very many Asian Americans, giving them the understanding that we're integral to the fabric of Illinois as well as the entire United States, and teaching them about the history of people like my grandfather who, you know, even though they were not authorized or welcome to come to this country, you know, they nonetheless stayed and worked and built their families and contributed to the fabric of our society. So, you know, that was, I think, one of the more meaningful ways that I helped, you know, in a long-term way address Asian hate. You know, we also, in smaller ways, you know, during the pandemic, we stood up, we had a growing Asian American caucus, and at the time there were 5 of us in the House. We stood together and made statements following, you know, egregious incidents that we learned about, and we made our presence known, and we spoke up and responded back to what was happening all over the country. And so, you know, those are, you know, some different ways that I approach this, but, you know, also there are existing mechanisms, you know, through the the Attorney General's office, through, you know, our city's Commission on Human Rights. You know, there are ways that we can educate the community about, you know, what to do in response to anti-Asian hate, and, you know, I support all of those entities, and you know, would like to encourage, you know, more people to learn about, you know, what to do in response.
Okay, and Representative Ma, do you have any new ideas for a potential coming term about unique ways to address anti-Asian hate?
Well, you know, I always support legislation that focuses on civil rights, consumer protection, immigrant rights. You know, so not just anti-Asian hate, but I have always addressed injustice in all different forms. And so, you know, my, you know, the bills that I've supported, the policies that I've supported, the budget items I've supported have always addressed inequality, and, you know, are focused on trying to achieve better equity for all groups that are underrepresented or suffer some sort of injustice. And so, you know, I think that you know, my concern about the Asian American community is consistent with you know, what I've always felt about addressing racial inequality, injustice, inequity in our society. And I think that being in the legislature affords me the ability to, you know, try to improve these situations all the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative. This next question would like you to comment on criminal justice reform. What current measures would you support to improve the safety of the district?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I think public safety is, you know, everyone deserves to feel safe, and I've long been concerned about the safety of our community. I, you know, regularly attend CAPS meetings and am in touch with 9th District, and, even before I was elected, when I worked for CBCAC, I would encourage, people to participate in community policing, attend the CAPS meetings. In the state budget, I have supported budget items that have helped law enforcement. For example, funding of, additional cameras and funding for the clearance to increase the clearance rates of various crimes. Forensic, more funding towards forensic labs. Sorry. And we've tried to do what we can in budget making to support law enforcement, and specifically for the Chinatown community. I think encouraging CPD to hire more officers that speak the language, speak Chinese here in the community. We've seen an increase actually in the number of Chinese-speaking officers, and I think that does help. It encourages more things like reporting of crimes, which had been at a very low rate previous. So many years ago when I first started working in Chinatown, that was an issue when there'd be a hesitation to report crimes, and so when that happens, there's no response, right? So I think you have to really focus on the mechanisms that make it easier for people to report crimes or to be comfortable with interacting with law enforcement and a feeling of trust and safety. And I think that we've improved some of those statistics here in Chinatown, and that's hopefully helped to increase the safety. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative. Moving to another question that is a little more nuanced. How will you address the gaping health disparity within socioeconomically disadvantaged communities? And what can be done regarding the access to linguistically and culturally competent mental health access across immigrant communities?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a big priority of mine, actually. Access to healthcare and addressing healthcare disparities. I have served as the chair of the Healthcare Licenses Committee, and continue as the vice chair since I'm now in leadership, and had to give up my chairmanship to take the leadership role. But in that capacity, one of the things I did was I worked on creating a pathway at the state of Illinois so that internationally trained medical graduates would have an easier time obtaining their license in Illinois, because there are a lot of folks who are trained in the healthcare system abroad, and then they find themselves here in the United States with almost no way to re-enter the healthcare system and obtain their license. And so I worked on legislation that removed those barriers and got our state's Department of Financial and Professional Regulations to create a pathway for international medical graduates. And what that does is it increases the number. Well, first of all, it allows people with that training to work in their trained professions, and so they don't have to work in survival professions, like driving a cab or working at a job way under their level of training. But it also allows the state to have access to more people who are who have training in the language, in cultural competency and language ability that is desperately needed in our healthcare system. I've also supported funding through our Department of Public Health to fund programs that address healthcare disparities. So, you know, looking at the social determinants of health and creating grants for safety net hospitals to partner with community-based organizations to address these issues of social determinants of health, you know, so that we can reduce these healthcare disparities. In terms of language access, I've supported language access legislation and was a co-sponsor for some of my colleagues' bills that had language access requirements in healthcare facilities. I'm currently a chief sponsor of a language access bill that has to do with administrative hearings at the state, but you know, that issue remains, you know, very, very important to me, and you know, I continue to work on it and you know, try to come up with ways all the time to address some of these healthcare disparities. You were asking specifically about mental health. The governor, in his budget address yesterday, committed some, I forget how many millions of dollars, but there was proposed a new program that focuses on mental health and making sure that there's insurance coverage for mental health services.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative. And to break things up a little bit, we're going to move to a yes/no question portion, where I will read a question, and then you will respond with the words yes or no only.
Okay.
And so, the first question is, do you support the following statement? State representatives and state senators should not have outside employment.
I don't have outside employment. Some of my colleagues do.
Yes, pardon, I'm sorry
yes,
to interrupt
I
you,
do
but
support
yes.
that. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Do you support the following? And just to be clear, you do support that statement that state representatives and state senators should not have outside employment? Yes or no?
Yes, although there are nuances because some people,
Sorry.
you know.
Sorry, Representative Ma. I will tell the timekeepers to ring the bell,
Yes.
and I don't want to do that. So, but we're going to move on to another statement. Do you support this statement? State representatives must disclose any conflict of interest before making any vote.
I think that yes, but we
Thank
do
you.
in many ways, you know, because our financial contributions are required to be reported, and so then we fill out a statement of economic interest form every year.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Representative. Do you support the following statement? There should be term limits for state representatives.
No.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And finally,
Well, I'll just say elections
No,
are natural term limits.
thank you. Would you support a referendum that asks voters to endorse an amendment to the Illinois Constitution that reforms the redistricting or remap process in Illinois by creating an independent citizens body to supervise decennial redistricting?
It's really hard to say yes or no to that because I was involved in redistricting 10 years ago,
Yes.
or more than 10 years ago, and it was citizens that were not elected to a body
So,
that did that. So I think it's very difficult to say. about that.
So no response. I see.
No response.
Understood. Thank you. Well, then moving back into the open questions response, which I presume you like more.
Yes.
What measures will you support to increase state funding for Chicagoland Transit, improve accessibility, and integrate fare systems across all transportation operators?
Right. So I just had a meeting a couple weeks ago when I was in Springfield with CTA, RTA, and PACE, and we were talking about the transit cliff. You know, I've long been a supporter of mass transit because I understand how important it is to our community. You know, we have a lot of people who rely on buses and trains and public transportation, just as I did when I was growing up. And last year, I actually passed legislation that created the transit benefits program that allows employees to take part in, well, so it requires companies to offer the pre-tax transit benefit to their employees. It's a program that already exists in the federal government, but employees weren't able to participate if their employer didn't offer it, and so I made it a requirement for employers to offer the transit benefit savings plan so that you can buy your fare card through your employer at a pre-tax rate, so you save money and you're also encouraged to take public transit. So that was my small way of encouraging more people to ride public transit on a regular basis, to make it a form of habit. This question of how to encourage more people to
Right, to increase
I mean,
rideability.
it's very complicated because we have 3 different systems, and not to nerd out about it, but we have 3 different systems that don't necessarily connect. There's a current proposal to combine the systems under one umbrella, but I think that would take a tremendous amount of coordination and political will, but I think that at a certain point, we do need to do that.
You can wrap up.
Yes. So, yes, I'm all for supporting public transit.
Okay.
I'll just say that.
No, thank you, Representative. And I see the timekeepers are glaring at me, so I'm going to do a better job at keeping to time.
But since there's only one candidate, don't I get double the time?
Right, understood. And actually on that note, we do want to give as much time for community questions, right? Because
Sure,
this unique
sure.
opportunity allows you to engage directly with them. So on that note, we're going to try to move a little quicker through this. The
Okay.
next question is, how will you increase employment opportunities for residents in this district, including green job opportunities?
Yeah, so I was one of the, I voted on the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which passed in Illinois, and we were on the forefront of states to do this, to have a long-term plan for moving to, a clean energy future. But that also included subsidies for job training for communities all around the state, because we need the jobs. We need to train people for these jobs of the future. And there are organizations around the district that have gotten grant funding and to participate in these job training programs. So, that's definitely something that I support, but workforce development has been something that's been very important to me and that I've worked on as a state representative. I was, when I was chair of healthcare licenses, I would always think about my role on that committee as one that always had workforce development in mind, and that was an opportunity to make sure that the community had access to jobs and the professional, and didn't have as many barriers, to professional licensing, that sometimes they would find themselves, facing. So yeah, there are lots of different ways to work on workforce development, and that's something I'm very much interested in.
Okay, thank you. Moving to another question, what environmental policies do you want to enact that balance economic growth with sustainability, addressing environmental justice concerns in Illinois?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the bills that I sponsored that passed in the House but didn't move in the Senate was a bill that would regulate the implosion of gas-powered plants. So this is following what happened in Little Village in 2020, when the implosion of the plant over there had disastrous outcomes, because the dust flowed around and went into neighboring communities. So what we found after that incident was that there wasn't statewide regulation that was required. The city enacted ordinances to regulate and make sure that what happened there wouldn't happen again, but there was a patchwork of regulations all over the state, and so I sponsored legislation to make that more uniform. I was able to pass that in the House, but it got stalled in the Senate.
I see. Okay, thank you. Moving to another question, how would you ensure that government spending is more transparent? And how is the government held accountable for responsible spending?
Well, I think there's always the need to get everyday people involved in our state budgeting process. So as I mentioned, the governor gave his budget address yesterday, and so that kicks off the process for this year's budget. I don't know how many people are aware, or if it's even on here, that, one of my jobs as state legislator is to work on the budget every year, and that means, taking all the tax revenues that we gather for the year and figuring out how that gets spent in the following year's budget. The governor gives a budget address, but the legislature has the final say. And so in the 3 months after the budget address, we have public hearings where, we hear from the state agencies or the organizations, that get lines in the budget. And, that process is actually transparent and open to the public. Obviously there are also negotiations that continue until we pass the budget at the end of May. And sometimes, I will hear from advocacy groups that come to me because, their organization or their program, receives a grant, and, they would like to see that continue or increase. And so, they come to Springfield and advocate for their own budget request. But the entire process, could be more transparent. There could be more participation from the general public in, having a say in, who gets what piece of the pie. I would love to do more civic education about how state budgeting works, or government budgeting at all different levels, funding. But if if anyone approached my office and asked me about, you know, a particular grant program or a budget item, you know, I would be, you know, happy to explain, you know, what the amount is and how we got there, and, you know, how, you know, everyday community folks can, you know, talk to their legislators about, you know, what you'd like to see in the budget.
Okay, thank you. And we're getting toward the ends here. This question is about a very important issue that is affecting our economy. It's about our pension liability. Illinois' unfunded pension liability stood at $142 billion as of mid-2023, far larger than the state's operating budget of $50 billion. The state's age-old pension crisis hinders job growth, turns away prospective new employers, and derails Illinois' long-term economic stability. In your opinion, what should Illinois do to solve the state pension crisis?
Well, I don't have an answer that fits within 90 seconds. Because
But please try to keep it under 90 seconds.
because it is a very complicated issue, and we've tried to work on it, you know, by making our full pension payments. In the last 5 years, you know, we've passed balanced budgets, and we've created a rainy day fund. We've, you know, paid down our debt, and the amount of time it takes for the state to pay its bills. You know, our backlog has gone way down, and we've had 9 credit upgrades, so that our state is at an A grade. And, you know, the pension issue does remain, but, you know, that was something that was created by legislative leaders from decades ago that short-shrifted the pension, and, you know, now we're having to deal with it. You know, we are doing our best to make sure that, you know, we are making the full payment, and I think that, you know, we continue to talk about, you know, different ideas for, you know, how we can best address this issue. But it is definitely a complicated one, and, you know, many of us in the legislature are very serious about trying to find a solution.
That's great. I was shocked that you were able to answer that under 90 seconds. But and so finally, we have our last question, which I think is a very fun one. If you had unlimited resources, including time and money, what would be first on your wish list for this district?
Yeah, I think that affordable housing would be an important way to invest that money, but also education and healthcare. I mean, you know, those all have been important issues for me. So, you know, continuing to invest in the social services and the people in our community is also important. And, you know, I think that, you know, Chinatown and the greater Chinatown area, as I'd like to call it, you know, because it's not just, you know, this commercial strip that we're talking about, right? The greater Chinatown area has been able to grow and thrive because of, you know, what it offers, you know, newcomers, new immigrants who come here. So we have to continue to make sure that the community organizations that provide those services are well-funded and well-resourced, and that we can continue to help them, help our community members. But it is important to maintain an affordable housing stock and support our public education system and our small businesses. And those are, you know, have always been the things that have been priorities for me. And, you know, given unlimited resources, you know, I would continue to put resources into all those pots.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative. And now that it is 7 o'clock, I would like to ask if there are any questions from the audience, unless Grace has a scheme for that. Of course.
Hello? Yeah. If anyone has any questions, please come up. And 如果有人如果有听众观众需要用广东话或者普通话问问题，也可以用广东话、普通话提问。我们小许会帮我们翻译。然后 Carolina, if there is anyone that would like to ask questions,
Okay. ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta en español? Yo le puedo ayudar a traducir.
Sam.
Representative Ma, first of all, thank you for coming out tonight. This community really needs the space for us to express our views and for you to express your views to us as well. I want to ask one thing about the migrant crisis. I know there've been a lot of there's been a lot of that this anti-migrant sentiment, especially considering how you would balance the limited resources that we have currently in our city government, our state government. Balance it with how we're processing migrants and also, you know, how we're dedicating money to our residents that have been living here for years on end. So I want to ask Representative Ma, what would you say to those people who have this type of sentiment? How would you get them to support, you know, the actions that the city and the state are doing to, you know, ease the migrants?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a question that's been on the forefront of many people's minds. And I think that, you know, many people are not aware of, you know, the work that has been done, you know, by the city and the state in the last 18 months, you know, as we've had an influx of migrants, and you know, the opposition to the use of any resources because, you know, of this idea that it will that it's a zero-sum game, and that, you know, directing funding towards the migrant crisis will take away from something else. You know, so far that hasn't happened. You know, we've been able to you know, provide a humane response to the people who have come here. And I think the last report that I got from the city, you know, the city has had something like 31,000, you know, migrants come to Chicago. And there are, maybe, I don't remember the exact number, maybe like 28 shelters, 26 shelters around the city. And actually the number in recent weeks has gone down to a record low, right? So part of that means that, you know, folks have been processed through the system and assisted with their asylum claims and applications and their work permit applications. You know, so some of the resources are going towards, you know, helping them, you know, get to a place where they're able to work and they're able to support themselves. And so the decline in the number that are in the shelters reflects some success with those processes. So we've been investing resources into like legal assistance, for example, that helps people get through the process so that they can stand on their own 2 feet. And then in some cases, you know, where, you know, people have told the city that, you know, they have friends or relatives in other places and they, you know, want assistance to go there, they've been given that. And then there has been support for people to move from shelters into temporary accommodations. So, you know, we are trying to put the resources into or address the crisis in a way that sort of, you know, helps move people along and gets them to a place where they can work and support themselves. And, you know, we've seen a huge decline in the number of folks that are in the shelters currently in the city. And the state is also helping with some of the shelters outside of the city and some of the migrant populations outside of the city. I think that, you know, so far we've been able to maintain this balance. And, you know, we're always going to try to make our decisions, you know, with that healthy balance in mind. You know, so in the budget address that the governor gave, you know, he announced the amount that he would like to see in the budget. And then he also talked about, you know, the stories of, you know, people who have stepped up to help and to welcome newcomers to our communities. And, you know, I think that those stories are important to hear too. You know, I think that we have an obligation to treat every human being with dignity and respect. And, you know, in the harsh Chicago winters that we have an obligation to ensure that, you know, children who are coming and women and you know, families, that they don't freeze or starve. And I think that's very, very important. And we've been able to do a lot of that, you know. But at the same time, I think that it's important to make sure that people in our communities also, you know, have the transparency and, you know, they're updated about what's going on. They have a way to communicate with those who are making the decisions, you know, about their concerns and to have their questions and concerns addressed, right? You know, I think that this is going to be a challenge for all of us for a long time, but you know, we have to do the responsible thing, and you know, and that means, you know, being thoughtful about, you know, how we allocate these resources and you know, finding the best use of some of these resources, right? So yeah. I mean, you know, sometimes I talk to people.
Representative Ma, we
Yeah.
should move on to another question.
Okay, sure.
Hi, Representative.
Hi.
First and foremost, thank you for being here with us tonight. And my name is Marvin Yu. I'm with Project Vision, and I am in the Civic Engagement Division.
Great.
We help promote civic action and civic engagement within the Chinatown community.
Excellent.
One big issue that we have been noticing is the decline in young voters, young Asian American voters in today's society. And I just want to know how you plan to address this issue, if you do. Thank you.
Yes. So I want to commend you for your involvement and for being engaged. You know, that's a first step, and, you know, spreading the word about opportunities to be part of Project Vision and you know, the Civic Engagement Division. I think that that's great. That's a great first step. I think that the way that I would like to address it, you know, I have a very personal connection to this issue of civic engagement and voting in particular. Because, as I mentioned, my grandfather came to this country in 1924 when the Chinese Exclusion Act was in effect. And so the Chinese Exclusion Act not only prohibited Asian, working people from immigrating to this country, but it also prohibited naturalization. So, no matter how long you lived in this country, if you weren't born here, you were not allowed to become a naturalized citizen if you were from any Asian country. And so, these laws were on the books for a really long time, until the 1950s. And because the original immigrant population was largely a male population, there were very few families because the immigration laws discouraged that. There weren't that many people who were born here to, be citizens and to participate civically. And so, voter suppression kind of happened on a really large scale for our community for many, many years. And so, for me, when my parents came to this country, they became naturalized as soon as they could. And I was born here. I heard my parents' stories, my grandfather's story, and I learned, all about U.S. history and how, people of color, not just Asians, but, there were other groups, African Americans in particular, that were denied the right to vote. So this is a right that we have that we had to fight for, that people died, for our right to vote. And so it's something that is so critically important, for us to participate in, because it's not something that, you can take it or leave it. It's a right. It's your way to express your views, your voice in our democratic society, right? Like, this is how, you get things done. If, you have the ability to elect someone who understands your community, cares about your community, knows how best to help the community and help people in the community succeed, that's like, your way of improving people's lives, improving society, improving the community in which you live. And you can do all that by voting, right? I've been alarmed at, not just the decline in Asian American voters, but I've sort of heard, I don't know how true it is, but I've sort of heard that, this current generation that's coming of age and becoming voting age is expressing a lot less interest or skepticism about voting and being part of the process. And, it's very alarming to me because, look, in 2010, when, I was working for CBCAC and, working with C.W. Chan and others in the community, our goal was to address the way our district was drawn, because, the district that I currently represent, Chinatown, Bridgeport, Pilsen, McKinley Park, Brighton Park, and Back of the Yards, the Chinese population in that area, was split into 4 different state representative districts. And so, we didn't have any voting power. We couldn't go to a state representative and say, hey, we need this, this, and this, because they'd be like, oh, there's not very many of you, you can't vote me out of office, I don't need to listen to you. And that's how it was for years and years, right? So it wasn't until we changed that map that our community had some voting power, some leverage to be able to say, do this or we're not going to support you anymore. And so, in 2016, when I got elected, the first Asian American in the General Assembly, but also, somebody who understands this community and, has been a part of a number of the organizations that exist in the community. I have a very deep understanding and concern for, what happens to our community. And so, during the pandemic, for example, I was able to advocate for resources that were specific to our community, right? Where there were free food distributions, all over, and we tried to have one in Chinatown, but the very first one was, not sensitive to the needs of our community. And so, we acted to change that and to make sure that every single one after that, was culturally sensitive and, not like drive up food distribution with boxes, that could be put in the trunk of a car, because most of our community members, don't have cars, and they they walk around the community, and they, come to the food distribution with their, their carts, and not, they don't want a box full of milk, yogurt, and cheese, that goes in the trunk of the car, right? So, having representation that understands what the needs are, right? That has allowed me to, help stand up a vaccine clinic and a testing site in the community.
Representative, if you don't mind wrapping up
Yeah.
your
So,
answer.
So anyway, but you don't get, a representative that is a good fit for the community unless you vote, unless you get out there and support the right person, right? Because if you don't get involved, or if I didn't get involved, if CW didn't get involved, I wouldn't be sitting here, right? So, that's why we all have to take part in this democratic process. So.
I'm sorry, would you mind actually pausing for just a moment?
So, legislator, if you had one message for these young voters, a real quick message for these young voters, what would it be?
Get involved.
Get involved.
Be
I like that.
active. Do something, right? Like, do something. Things don't happen if you just wait for time to pass and wait for somebody else to do it. You've got to, if you see something that you want changed, you have to get involved in some way. And, you don't have to be the only one making that change, but you can work together in a collective with other people, to bring about change.
Thank you.
And are there any other questions from the community? Oh, yes, David.
So Alderman Lee has been on record saying that she hopes the White Sox will stay in Bridgeport. Jerry Reinsdorf is floating this idea of $1 billion for his stadium. So what, would you support state funding for a sports stadium, or what conditions would you think that's a possible good use of state resources?
So I would like to act according to what's best for the community and what the community would like to see. So if the community wants the White Sox to stay in Bridgeport, then, I'm for that, right? But in terms of, state subsidies, spending state money, we have to be really careful about that, because I don't know, I would just have to know a lot more about what they're proposing and the details, before making any decisions. But you know, I wouldn't want to, you know, spend money on a new stadium if, you know, that means less money for, you know, other things that we need. So, you know, there's a lot of information that we still don't know. I'd like to do what the community wants and what's best for the people in this area.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, David. I see someone else has a question here. If you could please walk up.
Hi. Oh, hi. I'm Jessica. I'm a resident of Bridgeport. I just wanted to follow up on the young man's question earlier regarding young voters. I definitely appreciate your statement on how important it is, how kids should get involved, young folks should get involved. But you are right that it is not happening. There's a lot of lack of trust in the government, lack of faith that things will change. Do you have any sort of outreach plans or any way that you are hoping to fix that in communities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I helped to elect the youngest Democrat in the House, and she was a 23 or 24-year-old Indian Muslim woman who wears a hijab out in the suburbs, and she flipped a seat. And, you know, now she's been championing legislation to make it easier for younger people to vote. So she had a bill, you know, getting young people, you know, age 17 or so, pre-registered. You know, she had some great ideas about connecting, you know, getting your driver's license to registering to vote, especially young people. You know, so in terms of, you know, supporting legislation that creates a mechanism, making it easier for younger people to be registered, you know, which is just the first step. I think that, you know, those are they might help somewhat, but I think that being an example of, you know, part of like a new wave of legislators that are very different from the past, very different from the sort of patronage-focused, you know, machine politicians of the past, you know, that you're hearing about in the news, you know, they're getting indicted and convicted. You know, those are the ways of the past. And I think when I got elected, you know, there were a lot more people who came into these positions who are more thoughtful and transparent and ethical, and, you know, wanted to be more inclusive and get more people involved in the process. You know, I'm one of those.
Could you please wrap up your question so we can move to another one, but
so,
also directly addressing that person's question too, please.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah. So I've supported legislation that tries to address that question. I've also tried to be an example of like a more honest, ethical elected official that is inclusive, and hopefully that'll encourage, you know, more people to have faith in the system and get involved.
Thank you, Representative. And we have another question.
Good evening, Representative. My name's Diego. I'm a student who goes to Lane Tech on the north side. And every day I take the CTA. So my question would be, when you're saying how the state wants to like merge all the transportation agencies, or a lot of them, how do you plan to mitigate the issues that currently plague like the CTA? For example, the Brown Line usually suffers delays, which I usually take, and as well, buses, they take too long. They leave people out in the cold. So how do you like want to mitigate these issues so that they don't continue to occur?
Yeah, so the CTA is under the city's purview. I think there's been some dissatisfaction with the current head of the CTA. I don't know if change in leadership would address some of these issues, but that's been one of the ideas, especially with regard to the CTA. But I'm all for improving service for the CTA. I think that merging the three systems would definitely have to, keep in mind that there's local leadership that's needed. One of the challenges is, you have this like regional system and a suburban system and a city-focused system, and so making sure that if the systems are merged, that it's done in a way that people who are experts in what's happening at the city level, can remain in place to be able to improve the CTA system as best it can.
Okay, thank you, Representative, and thank you, Diego. We have one more question, right?
Hey, Representative, hi, it's me again. First, I want to introduce myself. I forgot to introduce myself in the first question. My name is Stanley Wu. I am a student at Lane Tech College Prep along with Diego, and I'm also a part of Project Vision. I want to ask you about the safety issue here in Chinatown. It's a very important issue, a very prevalent issue here. People are worried about being robbed along the streets, in the alleyways. And then if you think about last week what happened at Ken Key in Chinatown Square, where at 11 o'clock at night, patrons were still eating inside the restaurant, and they were involved in an armed robbery. So I'm asking, what is the state government doing in terms of improving the relationship between us and the police, and also what alternatives are out there? And before you answer, I want to briefly translate for those in the audience. Would you allow me to do that? Thank you. 各位朋友，各位晚安。我剛才咧係問馬議員一個對我哋唐人街居民係非常之重要一個問題，就係呢個治安嘅問題。令大家所知咧，上個禮拜喺華埠廣場，一個食肆係持械行劫，強記係俾人持械行劫，所以我就係剛才問咗馬議員，州政府如何改善警民關係，而且州政府對我哋治安嘅問題有咩重視，有咩重要嘅提示？
Okay, so yeah, I'm troubled to hear what happened at Ken Key last week. And I know that there is a lot of concern about safety in Chinatown. That's a priority for me too. State government, doesn't necessarily, have any control over CPD, Chicago Police. That's a city level. That's a city level department, right? But as a community member and as an elected official, I do work regularly with our local 9th district, and I'm constantly advocating for more resources directed to Chinatown and other parts of my district that are within the 9th District Police Station, right? So, I, have a direct contact to some of the officers in 9th District, and, if I hear about something that happens, I can always, call them and find out what's going on, and if there's a community member that has an issue that needs my intervention, I'm always happy to, serve as that advocate and bring something directly to the attention of the commander or the CAPS sergeant. But state government itself, doesn't have any control over Chicago Police Department. But as a member of the community, I have always been constantly advocating for, more Chinese-speaking officers, more resources for all parts of my district, and I also encourage people to attend the community policing, the CAPS meetings, and be aware and vigilant and always interacting with CPD.
Thank you. And I believe there are no further questions, so we are at the end of our program. If you all don't mind, I have some final comments before releasing you, and then Representative Ma will be available in the back. So, well, actually, would you like to give a closing statement of 2 minutes only, please, to wrap up the evening?
Sure. Well, I'm really happy to see everybody out tonight, everybody who's here, take the time to attend this civic event, and thank you for your interest in the electoral process and learning about the candidates and what we have to offer. It's unfortunate that my opponent for the Democratic primary chose not to attend tonight, but I've always been completely transparent and willing to talk directly to community members. I'm fully engaged. I'm in, I'm present in all different parts of my district all the time, and very interested in learning how I can help the community organizations as well as individual community members. As I said, my office is available to problem solve with you and help you break through any bureaucracy you might encounter with state government, with the agencies, or whatever it is that might be an issue for you. I also like to hear what's important to you and how I can make decisions about the state budget and what I push for, in response to what's been important to you. And so, please feel free to reach out to me and take advantage of all the different resources from my office. As I said, I have Chinese-speaking staff, Spanish-speaking staff, and we're always out there in the community making sure that that we are open and accessible.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ma, and thank you to all the attendees. Please remember to vote on Tuesday, March 19th, which is less than 1 month away. You may also pick up a copy of the fact sheet and voter guide at the front, and they can also be found on cbcacchicago.org. To support this year's election also, CBCAC is hosting opportunities to volunteer for nonpartisan poll watching and nonpartisan get out the vote assignments. CBCAC will also organize car rides for voters to polling places. Please stop at the CBCAC table outside for more information. And so at this time, you are welcome to mix and mingle with our candidate and check out resources from our co-host organizations at the front. As a reminder, we have 3-hour parking validation available, and please see a CBCAC staff member at the end of the evening for that. We also encourage folks to use a buddy system as you walk to your final destination outside of the venue. Our community is, of course, safe because we all watch out and care for each other. And so, on behalf of CBCAC and our co-hosts, thank you once again for joining us this evening. Please keep an eye out for each other on the way, and good night.
Can I just mention, early voting starts March 4th, by the way.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Representative Ma.